Hello and welcome to ukfitnesshub.com. My name's Tarrant, and in today's video we're going to be talking all about the pelvic floor. We're going to be going through what it is, what it does and how to best work it. Let's get into the video. Before we get straight into the exercises for the pelvic floor, it's really important to understand the functional anatomy and also what the pelvic floor actually does. And I've had a lot of male clients where I've said you need to work your pelvic floor, and they've looked at me not knowing, one, that they had a pelvic floor, and thinking as well it was just for women post-menopause or during pregnancy or for stress incontinence. So the exercises we're going to cover are both for males and females. And the whole point of having a strong pelvic floor is that you are strengthening up the muscles of the bladder, you're strengthening up the penis and the vagina, as well as the muscles of the bottom. So let's now look at some of the anatomy of these pelvic floor muscles. Now, I'm going to put on the screen as well a little picture, so as I'm explaining this, you can see it and conceptualize it a little bit easier. But at the front here, we have the hip bone, and at the back here, we have the coccyx, so we have the tailbone. Now, not only do the pelvic floor muscles go across these two landmarks, like underneath, like a hammock, they also attach at the ischial tuberosity underneath, and they come across into, you see this pole here, basically imagine that as the part that they would come in and meet together. Now, at the bottom, you'll notice on the picture that there's three openings, there's three holes. And of course, this is the depiction of a female pelvic floor where they have the vaginal opening, the anal opening and the urethra. The hardest thing to grasp with anyone doing pelvic floor exercises is when someone says contract the pelvic floor, people often go, what on earth do you mean? What does that even consist of or feel like? So I want to take some practical examples of the three openings. So the vaginal, the urethra and also the anal openings, and just give you a couple of practical examples. So for women, the vaginal exercises are fantastic, known as Kegels. For example, if a woman was to insert 1 to 2 fingers into the vagina, then squeeze into the fingers, that would be a beneficial way of working the pelvic floor. But what about for men? A couple of examples that I can give you, not that I would recommend these, but just to give you an indication of what it feels like to contract the pelvic floor, is if you was urinating, then mid-flow stopped the urination, that would be an example of you contracting your pelvic floor to stop your urination. And that feeling of stopping the urination is what essentially you're looking to do when you contract during exercise. Finally, for the anal opening, because that was the urethra, the anal opening, if you was to stop yourself from breaking wind, so you was about to break wind, then suddenly stop yourself, that would be you working the pelvic floor for the anal opening. Now, of course, for the urethra and the anal opening, you don't want to do those as practical exercises, and that's why we're going to go into the exercises that you can do for your pelvic floor right now. Let's now get into the exercises. So the first thing, I'm going to get you onto your back with your knees bent and feet on the floor. Now, these exercises are for pre and postnatal women, also as well work well for men and women with urinary incontinence, fecal incontinence, or alternatively any issue where they need to strengthen the pelvic floor, such as a prolapse. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one hand just below the superficial six pack, but on top or above the penis or vagina. I'm going to take the other hand and put it on the chest. And what I'm looking for you to do is breathe in and out. But when you do so, trying to contract what's called the transverse abdominis. So this is exactly where we have, well, where I have my left hand. And I want you to breathe in as much as you can and feel a contraction where your left hand is. Breathing in again. So as I'm breathing, I'm feeling my chest rise. I'm looking for a contraction of the muscle of the transverse abdominis, just at the lowest part of where my hand is. Now, this is really difficult to actually attain. So what I want you to try and do is, as you breathe in, try and draw your belly button down as well at the same time and see if you can get that contraction. And you would do this for 15 repetitions. Once you feel confident with that, we're going to couple up that breathing, so exactly the same thing, but we're going to do pelvic rockers. Now with a pelvic rocker, if I show you what it looks like, I'm going to bring my pelvis up, trying to almost tilt it in the position of my head, but the only thing I bring up off the floor is my tailbone. So I'm not coming into a glute bridge. It's a very subtle and slight movement where I'm coming and rocking back and forwards. You don't want to rock too far back where you start to see this go on, so where I start to create an arch in the lower back. We keep the lower back on. It's just the tailbone that comes up, off the floor, and back on. Now we're going to couple that up with the breathing we spoke about. So breathing in, coming up with the tailbone, and relaxing. So as we exhale, everything relaxes. As we inhale, we try to contract and we try and bring the navel down. Once you're getting really good at that, we could start to do exactly the same breathing pattern, but side to side. So what I mean by side to side is the pelvis going side to side, but not the knees like this. So knees stay nice and set, and we're trying to have minimal movement through the knees and try and get the pelvis working from side to side. The knees will work a tiny bit as they stabilize, but we're not looking for an excessive rock of the hip. So 15 repetitions, side to side, really slow. And with the breathing, if I accentuate it, so I'm almost trying to go one side, relax into the middle, the next side, relax into the middle, and that, if I went one side, middle, next side would be one repetition. Now, once you've got good at that, we're going to start to get the ball. The ball can be anything you want really, as long as it's not super inflated. So you can see I've got quite a bit of give in this ball, and I'm going to pop it just where my inner thighs are. Now, I want to squeeze into the ball, so I should be feeling at this point my inner thigh muscles contract. And then whilst I'm squeezing into the ball, I want to then think about with my feet coming out. So my knees are coming in, drawing into the ball, which you can see I'm squeezing into. My feet are doing the opposite. Whilst they're planted into the floor, they are coming out. And as I'm doing this, I'm looking to keep a contraction between 15 to 30 repetitions, so 15 to 30 seconds. And in that position, once I'm done, I'm going to slowly come out of it. What we don't want to do is start to squeeze so hard, we start to get a rocking or an elevation of the lower back. Keep that lower back completely flat and into the position that we want it to be in on the floor. Once you've done that, we can then do exactly the same motion on our front, which I'll show you last. And for the most advanced way of doing pelvic floor exercises, the actual pelvic tilt, so that pelvic rocker exercise, for those that are in pre and postnatal pregnancy and really are at the latter stages of strengthening up their pelvic floor, what I get them to do is I'm going to get them to come up, keep that position where they've just got the tailbone off, and then bring one leg up. Now with the breathing, what that looks like is so you can see I've held the breathing there, I've held the contraction. What a lot of people do is they cheat by really drawing their elbows in, getting that position, coming up too far. And when you do this for 10 to 15 repetitions on each side, you should be really feeling the pelvic floor by repetition number 5, 6, 7, because it's a really hard motion to come up and not try and cheat on. Now, for a lot of people, when they get to the absolute last stage, they'll come into this position. So there will be absolutely no assistance from the arms and no assistance from the elbows being in this position where the elbows can kind of come into a position where they cheat or they balance the movement for the actual individual. Now, I'm going to take my mic just off and pop it on the floor to show you the last one. Again, this is a great exercise that we can do with the ball. So we're going to take the ball, we're going to pop it in between the 2 feet, and in this position what I'm going to do is I'm going to squeeze into the ball, and just like we did, but it's the opposite this time, my knees are coming out, so I'm trying to keep them in contact with the floor, but they're coming out, and then my feet are drawing into each other. You can see the ball squeezing, and what will happen is here I'll get almost a direct position where my hips will want to come off the floor. So as I come in and out, what you want to stop is the hips doing this, because they will want to. So you've got to try and come into the ball, out with the knees, and then down. And that is exactly where we start to get the gluteal muscles and those deep pelvic floor muscles firing. And I actually feel this at the front as well as the back, because I'm really squeezing here as hard as I can. And this is one of the great exercises we can do, especially those with fecal incontinence and those that need to strengthen up that gluteal region, because it's not just the frontal region we need to work as well. And again, for this, 15 to 30 seconds. You can do all of these back to back. You may decide that some are too difficult, but eventually you're looking to get these into a position where you can do all of them. You've got them and the contraction set. And then at the latter stages, try to go for those single leg knee raises up to the chest, whilst you're also containing that pelvic rocker and the contraction. The breathing's really important, and that's why it's number 1 on these exercises, because once you get the breathing and the contraction, everything becomes a lot more easy and you can start to do exercises standing up or sitting down. But those are some of the best ones to get you started and some of the best ones to get you set with trying to work your pelvic floor. And that concludes this video on the pelvic floor. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have learned something new, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more free and educational content. I've been Travis Tarrant, you've been watching UK Fitness Hub, and I'll see you in the next video.